how do you sleep well at night knowing that there's volatility out there, especially in down markets like 2022, is you just got to look at these are mass market ready technologies. Quantum computing is not even necessarily going to be. We haven't really explored it all, which is just kind of a pretty good sized market today that could be a 20x increase in the next decade is the space economy. The classic quote is, we tend to overestimate our progress in the short term. Things don't happen as quickly as we want them to in a year or two, but then we underestimate our progress in the long term. I mean, governments better get it together quick. Like, the role of government has never been more important of protecting the interests of any country.
My favorite part of investing is the learning process. I love starting at ground zero, knowing nothing, complete fool, to spending 1, 2, 3 weeks obsessing over one particular topic to try and master it and learn everything I possibly can, which is why innovation is one of my favorite sectors to learn about. Because if you're a macro investor, it can be really easy to become bearish and negative about what's going on, especially with a looming recession. But when you turn your gaze to innovation, suddenly everything's exciting. The future looks bright. You get to see what all these absolutely brilliant people who are so much smarter than me are working on, whether it's in AI, quantum computing, or biotechnology, or even the space travel and space technologies that we've seen, which is why today's guest was so fun to talk to, and that's Simon Erickson, who has taken time to talk to some of these MIT scientists who are working in these different sectors. He's gone and seen the quantum computers, and it was great to hear his opinions on a lot of these technologies. He really helped me build a better framework for my understanding of quantum computing as well, to help differentiate the differences between that and supercomputing. And he did me a huge favor by bringing up the topic of space technology as we got to talk about some space mining. I was all on board for that. I think that this was a great intro to some of the biggest areas of innovation. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to visit Simon's links down below for his company, 7 Investing, so that you can also stay informed on what new thing he's looking at next. And with that, I hope you enjoy today's podcast. Well, I know we have limited time, Simon, and really appreciate to have you on today. We're going to discuss a lot of topics. Should be a really exciting conversation. But I just want to go ahead and kick it off. I know, we only got you for about an hour or so. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about 7 Investing, the company you founded?
Yeah, sure thing, Josh. Thanks for having me on the show. Glad to be here. I have been a guy that's always been kind of obsessed about innovation, about what the next big thing was going to be. And whether that was in specialty chemicals, I was a sales rep in my 20s that went out and saw these new markets developing, especially in agriculture and personal care and oil and gas. And then kind of from there went into renewable energy, saw solar power project demonstrations that we did for a very large oil company and what that meant to them. And then I worked for 7 years for the Motley Fool, ran a service that was very focused on innovation that was happening all around the world. And then in March 2020, I got bit by the entrepreneur bug, and we started 7 Investing to empower individuals to make better stock market decisions. So that's a 30-second overview of the last 20 years of my life.
Yeah, I mean, and it's impressive, that's for sure. And I noticed on your website, you have quite the portfolio of being really early to a lot of the big things, whether it was Bitcoin or biotechnology, like a very, very forward looking. I was really impressed, especially the consistency of that. Is there, what are you looking for when you're looking into innovation? Like, what are some of the key factors that have led you to the success that you've had?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing is to get out of your comfort zone and talk to people who are smarter than you are. I'm a big on conferences, big on technical conferences, and you just start through osmosis to learn about the things that these people with PhDs and postdocs and all of this knowledge are excited about out there. And I was always the guy with my laptop, just, hammering away and then trying to make sense of everything on the flights home about what was really going on out there. And I was not bashful about interviewing them and following up later on. Not only is that just good for building a professional network out there, but you start to kind of connect the dots after a while and say, okay, this is not just something you read about in a headline from the financial media. This is something that's got thousands, if not millions, of people that are very sharp, pushing for it, and that tends to come together over time. It's exciting to see.
Yeah, but that's awesome. I mean, that's also the basically one of the pillars for why I've created this podcast in general, or Monty and I have. So talk to smart people like you. So like what would you say has been your most successful investment to date when it comes to innovation? What has stood out as the big winner for you?
Oh yeah, I guess in terms of the biggest total return, I was in, like I said, solar and renewable energy before, and so right after this company IPO'd and went public, I bought a whole boatload of shares of Solar City. I liked the technology that they were doing. I liked the financial approach, and it was really kind of neat too, because there was a chairman of the board of this company whose name was Elon Musk. And, he's familiar for most people listening to this podcast. He then acquired all of Solar City, and we rolled it right into Tesla shares. And from holding on to those for a decade, I mean, it doesn't surprise anybody where Tesla stock has gone for the last 10 years or so. That kind of funded Seven Investing and brought in the team that I have and the expansion that we've had. But a lot of it kind of came back from seeing something I was familiar with, putting a lot of money into it very early on.
That's awesome too. So you were like way early to all of that, caught all the Tesla waves. It's impressive. It's very impressive. Yeah. So when you're buying up those growth companies, though, I mean, especially in the early phases of that and riding all the waves that Tesla had, even, boarding bankruptcy several times. A lot of these companies are not profitable. There's a lot of risk in them. How are you managing that risk and, not panic selling out when there is FOMO in the markets?
There is, and growth style investing as a whole is kind of a victim of the hype cycle. For anyone who's not yet familiar with that term, we tend to get really excited about things that are new and shiny before they prove themselves, right? It's fool's gold, or it's something that looks like it's going to be a lot more successful than it turns out to be. And that's the nature of everything, right? 3D printing, same kind of thing, nuclear fusion, all these things that are really exciting and get people pumped up about them, even to some point, cryptocurrencies too. They get a lot of hype around them. People bid up the stock prices of a lot of these companies, and then they just crater and they fall sometimes 50%, sometimes 70%, sometimes more than that. And so to answer your question of how do you sleep well at night, knowing that there's volatility out there, especially in down markets like 2022, is you just got to look at the execution of these companies to be like, all right, is this a company that's doing really, really well and is riding this growth wave because they're better and more innovative than everybody else? Or is this something that was a flash in the pan that attracted some money and it really kind of fizzled out? I would argue that a lot of cannabis companies kind of are the latter. They just attracted a whole lot of money and fell apart, 3D printing the same thing. Whereas there are innovators out there. I mean, if you look at the Trade Desk and what Jeff Green has done with that company in digital advertising, he is 3 steps ahead of anyone else on the demand side platform for doing the best ROI possible for his ad agency companies. I mean, there's innovation that's true innovation, that's like ahead of the curve of what everyone else is catching up on. And then there's fake innovation. You kind of have to be able to separate the two.
Yeah.
As far as that goes, do you look for the guys that can, land and expand the fastest? Do you look for the guys that can potentially become profitable the soonest? Or, how do you separate the winners from the losers when it comes to a singular idea like that?
We overvalue revenue growth in the earliest phases because you almost assume that a company that's doing $10 million and grows to $50 million in a year, you quickly look at that and be like, oh my gosh, they quintupled their revenue. Look at how awesome this is. It's obviously got to have credibility out there. And even small cap companies, that have got a couple of $1 billion in market cap or a couple $100 million in revenue. Those are early. That's very early and very easy. You kind of have these early adopters that are really excited about these things, right? You've got guys that are going to the MIT and the South by Southwest conferences and are real excited to, go load up on Dogecoin when they're living in their grandma's basement. It's a lot harder to get the mass market to actually get into these kinds of things. So you've got a combination of like, who's the right visionary leader that's going after a very large addressable market, but they're taking it off in bite-sized chunks that they just continue to grow and be profitable for. Again, Trade Dress is another example. I don't want to harp on that one too much, but it's a great example of a company that's growing even still today at 30% plus top line growth and capturing a 40% EBITDA margin you got to look for combinations and stuff like that, because not only are they going out and they're taking it, they're rewarding us as investors with it.
No, absolutely. Yeah, there's very far and few between that seem to be able to connect those two dots, have that growth, but not at all costs, be able to manage their costs and margins and be expansive on that basis. It's funny you mentioned South by Southwest. I'm sure we were there at the same time one year, but you for the conference, me for the music, but I digress there.
Those are both amazing, and you got to do both if you're there, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw in my background, I got a big old drum set back there somewhere, and that's what I was there for.
Love it. Love it.
So so right now, when we're looking at probably the AI companies as like the big hype that everyone's looking at, and as you're separating those winners and losers, or even just looking at where the market is currently evaluating these companies, even some big ones that have already proven to be winners, like Nvidia, like what's your overall assessment of this sector right now for the AI participants?
It kind of depends, you know. A lot of people are saying it's overhyped. I'm not sure I agree with that. It might just be short-term overvalued. And again, if you're looking to jump in and out in a couple of months, maybe this isn't the best entry point. But on the other hand, it's really hard to displace NVIDIA at this point. I mean, they are so embedded with those cloud data centers that are just embracing AI, and it's almost damn near impossible for another chip maker to keep up with the performance per power efficiency of the GPUs that it has. I mean, that took 20 years to perfect. They're incrementally make it even better each and every year. A lot of people are trying and failing. And then you've got the software components on top of that, and you got the relationships with customers on top of that. I don't think, I wouldn't say that NVIDIA is a bad investment if you're thinking several years out. I think that even a $1 trillion market cap, this is a company that's going to continue to just build on its leads and its competitive advantages that it has, and be even stronger in the future than it is. Now, on the other hand, there's competition. You know, there are going to be other winners out of things like this, but AI as a whole is definitely still early innings. I don't think any growth style investor you talk to is going to think that this is just a flash in the pan that goes away in a couple of years.
Yeah, no, I could definitely agree with all that. I am, however, less certain on some of the more service-based AI companies like C3 AI. What is your view of these more like service-based companies right now?
Yeah, they're pretty cool. I mean, C3.ai is going after it for the enterprise, right? They've got a CEO and founder of the company that has a long tenure in software, multi-decades. You know, he's been around and he's seen a lot of things, and he is really let me get back to that in a minute. Let me digress for a moment and kind of tell the story of AI. Is that AI isn't just something that happened all of a sudden. ChatGPT made it super popular because they unleashed, or I'm sorry, OpenAI released ChatGPT, and then you had 100 million users adopt it in just a matter of a couple of days. And so now everybody's talking about AI. Genie's out of the bottle. Pandora's box has been released. But before that, machine learning has got roots back to Jeff Hinton and University of Toronto and kind of ImageNet and all of these other things, where it was basically just statistically understanding lots and lots of data points, right? So if you're looking at a picture, after a while, you can start seeing a gradient between a very light shade and a dark shade. And all of a sudden you said, okay, that's something that's got a sky background. And then after a while, you can start to, you know, this color gradients and other, you know, statistical means, you can start saying, okay, that is a beak. I'm 99% possible that's a beak. And then after that, you kind of start piecing together beaks, and you say, okay, I'm 99% positive that this is a bird. And then so AI in its earliest chapters of this was recognizing images much more accurately and much more quickly than anybody else could do. And then, of course, in the recent years, we've now evolved from image data and image gradients to words, where we could recognize letters and then text words and then combinations of those words. And now we have large language models that can understand what we're saying so that it can immediately respond. It's the same idea. We're not recognizing birds anymore. We're recognizing questions that are being asked to a prompt like GPT did. And so the next evolution of AI is going to be video. You know, it's going to be contextual data of whatever you want to train it to do. Back to the C3.ai of the world, you know, where Tom Siebel kind of created companies before and has been around for 3 or 4 decades doing this. He understands there are biases that AI still is prone to. And that can be very problematic if you don't think through things very responsibly. And so he's cautioning the world, if you've seen a lot of the things that he's saying, to, yeah, the genie's out of the bottle now, but we still got to be smart about how we're doing this. Otherwise, we're just getting really, really excited about inaccurate or biased answers that are being trained based on how we train these AI algorithms. And so to your question about is C3.ai a good company or not, it is a more conservative company than OpenAI is. They're going after Shell, who wants to fine-tune the information provided by its subject matter experts of the oil field to make more efficient projects and other things that it's going to have more control over. But on the other hand, I don't know if that's good or bad or right or wrong or profitable or unprofitable. There's just different approaches to how we're going to go after AI in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah. That's a really fair assessment. It's really, really complicated. Even just trying to figure out these biases, or even, when you ask the experts, I've listened to a lot of the AI experts, and even for the understanding of how the in-between phases between inserting a prompt and then how it's actually generated, it's like bouncing around through all these parameters, and they can't even explain to you how it works. So yeah, it's extremely complex. And I think you kind of summarized the problem with trying to come up with an evaluation of someone like C3 AI pretty well. That's some of the difficulties, but I really appreciate your insight there. So the big thing that I've been thinking about right now, and you were talking about, once you study a lot of different types of innovation, you start to connect the dots. And one of the things that I've been really interested in is the relationship that AI might share with other types of innovation, especially with things like biotechnology, which is actually my background. So I'm coming from a majoring in biotechnology and biochemistry before I found finance. So this is something that really is excites me. It's one of the, when I think about all these giant databases with all these genomes and the way that AI functions, it's a big problem solver, big puzzle solver. And so I'm curious if anything stood out to you and the relationship that these might develop in the future, and maybe if quantum computing will also kind of help play a role in that.
I think that's very perceptive. And you said the right two words there when you said quantum computing, because now we're kind of looking at kind of two different scenarios, right? So there's some things that just are meant to be mass market adopted, right? Like we were just talking about, kids in their basement of their grandparents that are buying Dogecoin, versus the mass market adopted. There are certain things like cloud computing and AI that just are going to plug right in with what Microsoft has already got built out with the enterprise, with what Google's already got built out with consumers. Like these are mass market ready technologies. Quantum computing is not even necessarily going to be mass market. It's really neat because there are certain problems out there that we cannot solve today. They are too hard. And even with AI, we just don't have the horsepower to even solve them. You mentioned biotechnology. That's one of many things that just, there's so many inputs and so many things you can monitor now that we can have the data, but we just can't even come up with the answer. It's too hard. It takes too long to process these things. How can you simulate all of the vibrations of a molecule that's supposed to be going out there and either being a diagnostic or a therapeutic or something that's interacting with the rest of the body? Or even look for all of the interactions between all of the molecules in your blood right now, or even all of the interactions between everything that's going in your brain as you're trying to detect or diagnose or treat things like Alzheimer's. On top of that, I mean, there's even more complicated things out there. Nuclear fusion has been something that's been talked about right now, but how do you design something like that? How can you proactively design weather patterns based on all of the pressures and temperatures and the gradients between them of every latitude and longitude on the Earth? I mean, things like this, we're getting pretty good at collecting data, and we don't really know what to do with it. Now, quantum computing is so interesting because all of a sudden you've got a completely different way of actually doing this computing, number crunching all this data that you're collecting in a way that maybe, and again, question mark on that, but maybe we can start taking millions, if not billions of inputs, resonating these qubits at the right frequencies and getting an output in seconds or minutes rather than thousands of years. Even GPUs and CPUs and the things that we've traditionally been doing, even for the biggest supercomputers in the world, at these academic, labs that have got the budget to do them, maybe if we just stop looking at zeros and ones and these mathematical calculations, we completely do these different types of computation, we can solve some of these really, really hard problems. And so all of this is my long-winded way of saying, I don't think quantum computing catches on like AI or cloud computing does, where NVIDIA is going out and installing GPUs into these data centers that are being run by Microsoft and Google out there. I think it's more like a consulting project where you've got a biotechnology company or a drug developer that's trying to interact or look at the interactions of all of these things that they're doing as they're creating the appropriate molecules for these drugs. That all of a sudden, can they pay $50 million for a quantum computer that can solve these things where no one else could? Hell yeah, they can. And they're going to, because they've got a really deep pockets to do it. And by the way, if Merck does that, Bristol's going to do the exact same thing. Every other, Pfizer's going to do the exact same thing. It's going to become an arms race to keep up your competitor with your competitors, because you don't want them to have an edge over what you do.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think the differentiation was something that I didn't have previously between what solutions a quantum will really be based towards, because I think a lot of people do this too, because a lot of the articles I read kind of look at it as just like a level up of AI that everyone will use, rather than having be a specific solution for more complex problems. So is there anything promising right now that stands out to you? I know there are some quantum computing companies out there with big promises. What has your attention right now, if any?
I'll tell you, Josh, if you make it up to the MIT conferences, no matter what year you go, you're going to hear the exact same thing, which is going to be quantum computing is 5 years away. Now, if you go the next year, they're going to tell you it's another 5 years. And if you go 5 years out, they're still going to tell you it's 5 years out. It's like this chicken and the egg problem. Businesses that are eager to adopt this say, okay, $100,000 a qubit, 100 qubit machines out, that's $10 million we got to spend for a quantum computer that we'll plug into. That's pretty darn expensive. If you're going to charge us that much money, you better be accurate, right? We're going to define this problem and do whatever you tell us to at the interface, but it's got to be right. Otherwise, we're wasting our money. And then nobody can do that right now, right? Nobody's got a perfectly useful, commercially useful, error-corrected quantum computer that is even economically feasible, much less certainly going to be accurate. And noise can't, canceling out all the noise and all this other stuff. But on the other hand, no one wants to build the computers, without having kind of customers lined up that are ready to do it. So that's why we're always 5 years out. You hear the killer apps all the time being talked about, and we're kind of aware of them. But on the other hand, I don't know. I'm not sure. I still think it's one of those, it's going to be cool one day and everybody's eager to adopt it. But when that moment happens, is it going to be 2023 or 2033? I couldn't tell you right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and I want to, bring up a point you made, as far as the accuracy goes, just talking to the few data scientists I know in my network asking about quantum computing, the ultimate issue comes down to accuracy. You can get to the result faster, but, does it really make a difference if the result's wrong? So that seems to be the number one challenge when comparing quantum to high performance computing or whatever they're using these days.
It's insane how hard it is to do, right? Like we think about it, and even experts in the field struggle with even making these things, because any interference in the system screws everything up, right? It could be just a slight vibration from an earthquake that happened hundreds of thousands of miles away. It could be radiation from clay in the bricks of the building that you're using. I mean, any kind of interference just throws off all the results, and you say, okay, scrap it, do it again. You look at what MIT's doing, they're trying to build it from the ground up. And even they are saying, yeah, okay, we're doing some neat, science projects, but to make this economical, very, very challenging.
Yeah,
that seems to be what it's going to come down to. Is it economically feasible?
So when you're looking at the broad different sectors, whether it's the clean energy, the AI, or biotechnology, etc., what what is standing out to you the most right now? Because I know the hype is around AI, but what has you the most excited to learn about right now?
I really like that question, because we tend to sometimes as investors we get so focused on earnings or like just margins and these things that are just kind of incremental improvements of stuff that's not that exciting, right? Like what's the next dating app going to do, and things like silly things like this. But then you've got kind of the true innovations that are out there. It's like, what have we not tackled that we need to? Like, what is Elon Musk focusing his time on trying to solve out there? And then people like that. By the way, Josh, I love the picture in the background of Elon Musk that you've got.
Thanks. Yeah.
But one of those innovators, you look at guys like that, and it's like, there's a reason that he's the world's richest man, because he goes out there and he is all in on kind of the hardest problems. I do think that kind of with this new computing paradigm that they are in now, I think that we can start solving some really hard problems, like we mentioned earlier. And design is going to be like the new most important thing for a lot of these companies. How do you frame a quantum computer to solve the problems you're looking to solve? If you're in semiconductors, how do you design a more efficient chip that might compete with NVIDIA? If you're in the power industry, energy industry, how do you design a smart grid that's more efficient? Things like this, really, really tough problems. But like now, all of a sudden, we've got ways to start designing things that would be better solutions that are completely disruptive to the just good enough incremental improvements we've had. And like for those that follow Clay Christensen and the Innovator's Dilemma, I mean, this is disruptive. You can now make things that are not just 2 or 3 times better, but 1,000 times better than where we were before. But it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of thought. Healthcare could use a lot of help with design right now. And then the other piece that we haven't really explored at all, which is just kind of a pretty good sized market today that could be a 20x increase in the next decade, is the space economy. Satellites today are looking at things and taking images of things and doing work for the Defense Department, and they're beaming down telecom stuff. Satellite internet is kind of just in its earliest stages, but I mean that's a $400 billion market that's just getting started right now. And you see what Starlink is doing and what SpaceX is doing and what companies like Rocket Lab are doing. It's enabling a completely different creativity for smart entrepreneurs to start harnessing. And if you can figure that out and do that in a way that we haven't been able to before at all, that's pretty exciting. And I think that's going to open a whole lot of doors. I think space economy is something I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes into that as well. I've done some digging, especially during COVID. There were all these SPACs that were space related. Now they varied from the actual technical side to sort of spectacles to go visit space. But there's also so many different components that play into that. So if you're an investor, are you usually looking to invest? And I want to dive deeper into the space idea, but just in general, when you're looking at that space component, are you looking to invest in the company that's actually trying to, like Starlink, that's trying to send these satellites out there, among other tasks? Or are you looking also at the peripherals, for as like the company that's creating the steel for them, or the copper, or that's creating the I'm drawing a blank, but the other components necessary for them to create their product or their service?
Yeah, good question. Also, with that one, I mean, like, there's kind of both, right? It depends on what type of investor you are. Do you want to go after the risky, sexiest part of the industry that could be worth 100 times your money, or do you want to play it a little bit safer with companies that are doing the picks and shovels, but they're going to have more dependable revenue streams? We can look at kind of um, the chip industry as an example of this, right? You've got the designers of chips like the NVIDIAs, the AMDs of the world, and then you got the manufacturers of the chips like the Taiwan Semiconductors of the world, and then you've got the people that are using the chips like Microsoft putting them into data centers, and then you've got the software companies like OpenAI that are tapping into those. There's different margin profiles for each one of those parts of this industry. And just like space economy is going to similarly going to be, okay, what do you want to get into space to do in the first place? How are you building your satellite? Are you doing it yourself? Are you hiring someone else to do it? How are you getting into outer space? And, are you hitching a ride with Elon's massive rockets, or you got your own dedicated launch out there? And then who's operating them, once they're up there, space as a service kind of stuff. But it's kind of the same thing. I mean, whether you look at cloud computing or chip industry or whatever, you have some new infrastructure that has to be in place for it to happen. You've got providers of the picks and shovels that are serving that infrastructure. You've got the companies that are embracing that to do something cool, and you've got the kind of the operations to make sure satellites aren't colliding into each other and various other things. Each one of those has got winners that will emerge and will consolidate power in doing whatever they're doing really, really, really well.
That's an interesting idea, that a company would provide a service that would prevent satellites from bumping into one another, because I've been seeing some headlines. I haven't really followed if there's any litigation in the pipeline, but some governments being concerned about in the future there being so many satellites by different foreign companies as well as us. But the idea that a company would do you think a company will fill that role, or do you think there's still a lot of political risk that's going to be involved with different litigations that are going to have to come around to just, unpack the new problems that we'll have with the development in the space?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, the public versus private, expansion to space is a tough line. You want to go out and do something really cool and innovative, but on the other hand, every country's got its own national interests, at heart. Are you working for the United States? Are you working for Russia? Are you working for China? Whoever it is. I mean, like it's almost like we're drawing these battle lines on the ground of Earth, but then we're also drawing these battle lines in space. You've seen kind of hopefully some of those hypersonic missile programs the U.S. is doing to track and then deploy things to either launch or shoot down missiles that are going several times the speed of sound out there right now. That's not just something that hasn't happened. It's a result of a response to these programs that are of concern, maybe of China and even with Russia and South Africa recently.
And we've even heard, sorry to interrupt, but we've even heard Elon recently talk about that at a conference just a few days ago, about, hey, I'm providing Starlink for free and not getting compensated where other companies who are showing support Ukraine are being compensated. And I have no way to prevent Russia from deciding they want to take Starlink out with one of these supersonic missiles and just take the whole thing offline. It's $10 billion at risk, as well as paying for it out of pocket. And there's a lot of risk in that, especially if there is going to be some sort of conflict in the future. And that's another huge risk for the space that makes me worried. It doesn't hinder my excitement, but it does make me worried.
There are some things that every country out there does seem to have an interest in, though. National interests and sovereign interests aside, I mean, like, we don't want to blow up satellites normally. We don't want to waste money on things that collide with each other. We don't want to do things that are really harmful for the environment. Generally, there's kind of like going to be this, we all kind of nod and say, okay, there's some things we need to monitor space. We need to make sure that people going into space are safe. We need to make sure that debris gets cleaned up. I mean, stuff like that. The data and the imagery and the defense stuff, that's one side, but there's also kind of this basic level of like, we've got to have this, and we can work with a whole bunch of different governments to have that provided.
Yeah, hopefully all working towards that goal, kind of like the International Space Station. Like, exactly. we'll set our differences aside in the name of science, which I always love to see. For sure. Do you have any? This might be a more fantasy question, but does the idea of mining space interest you at all? I've heard some people theorize on it. Crunching the numbers, it doesn't look like it's gonna really be. It could. I mean, there's a trade-off, right? If you could go far enough, there's some pretty big rocks that look interesting. But I mean, what's your opinion on that?
I mean,
that's mining comets and meteorites, right?
No, yeah. That's the right way to put it. Is there's rocks that look interesting out there, right? Like you look across the periodic table, and we call some of them rare earth metals. But like really, we just need to call them rare metals, right? Like
Yeah,
if you
right.
get some of those from outer space or asteroids, and you've got a way to reliably do it, and by the way, that lessens your dependence on kind of maybe some governments you don't want to work with on some of that stuff.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. Gallium and germanium are coming from China right now in large quantities, and a lot of those are necessary for developing the kind of the next wave of a lot of semiconductors that are much more efficient, right? Uh, do we want that? You know, if we don't have the supplies under the ground from where we can mine them from, can you get things like that from elsewhere? I mean, stuff like that is on the minds of anybody who's trying to scale up um, supply chains to serve things like electric vehicles or the new wave of energy out there.
Yeah. No, that's a really, especially with renewable rocket fuel and stuff like that, and those advancements, then that conversation becomes more and more probable. And I didn't even think about the limitation. I didn't even think about the separation, because when you're thinking about something like that, you have to think about what's the motivator to do that. But the separation from dependence on other countries is a pretty big motivator. Because I was originally thinking of things like you can get gold or other precious metals that are just hold a lot of value. That to sell. I was thinking more of like a gold mining company. And I'm not saying this is realistic, but like a gold mining company say we're going to go mine gold at outer space, which I guess would invite a whole nother conversation of what is the value of these things if they're limited here on Earth, but pretty much unlimited, surrounding the planet. That's a lot. Have you thought about that problem or talked to anyone that's kind of thought about that problem on a longer time frame of maybe 50 years or 100 years? Is that too far out there? Is that too sci-fi at the moment to really enter
It's not.
yeah.
No, it's not. I mean, like the classic quote is, we tend to overestimate our progress in the short term. Things don't happen as quickly as we want them to in a year or two, but then we underestimate our progress in the long term. That we actually, if you look 10 years back from where we were today, and you look at all the progress we made since 2013, it's amazing. Right? Like look at AI. Like hardly anybody was really talking about machine learning inference in 2013, and then all of a sudden it's everywhere now, right? And it's going to be amazing what 2033 is going to be too. Josh, what are you and me and Monty going to talk about in 2033? And we look back on this podcast and be like, man, we were saying that asteroid mining was crazy at the time, and quantum computing was 5 years out of the time. And it's going to, I mean, when you have people like, the Elon Musk of the world that think in terms of 10x, an order of magnitude improvements, and you see what they accomplish, suddenly these things that seem untackleable or impossible are not impossible. And then you build upon this next, order of magnitude jump that you make to do something even cooler that's farther out. It's going to be pretty exciting. We'll probably have a colony on Mars, if not with people inhabiting it, but there's going to be something on Mars by 2033.
Yeah. I don't know if I'll go to Mars because that sounds terrifying, but it's definitely cool to think about. So I want to backtrack a little bit too. Although that was fun, a really fun conversation. I love thinking about that. The space exploration. But when we're trying to solve those problems to get to that step, do you think that in the future, or maybe even in the near future, that most discoveries won't be from people, but rather like AI or quantum computing actually solving these major problems? Is our job just going to be to just ask the right question and then let it do all the experiments? Basically, is that kind of what the future is looking like? And what happened? Well, I'll add this too. What happens when you throw the stock market at something like quantum computing? It's also something I've thought about. Like, does it master that pretty much overnight on like the best trading philosophies and stuff? And then, I'm a trader, so am I just out of work?
We might all be out of work, right?
Yeah,
I mean, the most interesting thing of all of AI is it does not have the same biases that human beings do. You think about how we tackle problems. We build organizations, we build corporations, we get shareholder funding, from publicly traded stocks to go out there and invest in projects. We have decisions made by managers who represent the data that's interpreted by analysts to people that make decisions at the top. You go forward with solving those things. It's kind of like this interesting framework we have of solving problems. AI has none of that. AI looks at just data and just says what it thinks based on all the data you fed it. It's going to see things that you never saw before. It's like looking at a telescope, and like in a telescope, you can see planets, you can see stars. Now imagine you got a telescope that can see gravity, that can see black holes, you can see all this, radiation, things like that human eye could never see. And so now your interpretation of the universe you can see through a telescope is completely different. Same exact thing with AI. It's going to have completely different outcomes because it's going to see problems completely different than how we've tried to solve them in the past. What does that mean for any industry or any of our jobs, or even jobs in general? We don't know yet.
Yeah, that is.
So it sounds like a tool in the toolbox and not necessarily the ultimate replacement.
The toolbox has completely changed. You're not using hammers anymore.
Yeah.
Going
That
from a
is-
hammer to a drill.
Right.
Yeah. Do you think that do you see massive job replacement from the stage that AI has achieved so far? And it's just like we're just slow to the adoption and it will take some time to play out, but it's kind of already here or at that point? Or do you think we need a little bit more development in the capabilities with something like ChatGPT 4?
I'm sorry, Josh. Could you rephrase the question for me? I didn't understand. Is it going to replace jobs, you thinking?
Well, yeah, well, I think in the future it will replace jobs, but with the capabilities that AI has right now, do you think it has the potential to replace a good fraction of the amount of jobs that are out? We've seen some of that in some select areas, kind of, but do you think that that's just because the adoption's slow, or do you think like politicians and stuff, do you think, I mean, they haven't made any major changes, but we've seen some forward-looking people like Andrew Yang come out and say, hey, we need universal basic income because of these innovations. Is that something that you think we're slow to realize the amount of job displacement this is going to cause right now? Or do you think it's still going to take a little bit of time and improvement from an AI to come around and do that?
I mean, governments better get it together quick. Like the role of government has never been more important of protecting the interests of any country, right? And whether that's jobs, whether that's macroeconomy, whether that's pandemics that break out. I mean, like, the response from government has to be faster because it kind of used to be you kind of regulate, large corporations. We now had tech companies and we kind of had these bumpers that we put them in. And like, you don't put bumpers in place for AI. This is why Elon is so worried about AI and how it could like threaten humanity as a whole, right? I mean, the guys that get exposed to this stuff are kind of terrified of it, and governments are always 10 steps behind the technologists that are getting it out there. There is no politician in Washington, D.C. that is well versed enough as any of the engineers, the prompt engineers that are working, with OpenAI. And you talk to, these guys out there, the Ray Kurzweils of the world, the Ben Goertzels of the world, the Singularity kind of guys of the world. And, these are the ones that are saying, hey, the singularity is coming. You're not going to slow this down. Good luck controlling it. If you want to have some kind of control, you better get proactively far ahead of this. And you're going to have to cooperate with every government on the world to do it. And by the way, good luck with that. But they're also saying that like it's not a bug, but a feature of AI to replace jobs. I saw Ben Goertzel when they introduced Sophia at South by Southwest years ago. Hanson Robotics, Sophia is this autonomous robot that looked at us and interacted with us in the audience. By the way, this is like 7 or 8 years ago. You can imagine how far it's come since then. But, we're all in the room kind of feeling like, wow, we are inferior to this robot that now can remember everything and be much more efficient than anyone in this room at any job that Sophia does. How do we adapt to that? We don't know. Government has to have some stay in this, but even the government doesn't know what to do about AI. Apologies that this isn't the rosy, bullish picture on the technology, but I think that it is important that we start recognizing these things and the biases that AI has, and that we're not as in control of this technology as maybe we think that we are.
I still see it as very bullish. That might be a more fringe opinion, but I think hey, if this wants to do most of the work and I can enjoy some more of my free time, I'm down for that. I think most people are down for that. Now, with that free time, I'll probably just do more work. But I think a lot of people will enjoy, like not having to be a slave to the corporation, to a job they don't like, and having an AI do it, and then something like universal basic income. stepping in, because I don't see any other solution. And we've seen, historically, someone like Rome, where this is getting a little off topic on a tangent, but someone like Rome, where they took a bunch of slaves and displaced most of their workforce because slaves are cheap and free, and then collapsed because of it through revolt of the population. So I see it as that type of existential problem where people find meaning in their jobs, and they're going to need to find meaning in something else if AI is going to take all those jobs.
Yeah.
So
and there's still gonna be plenty of good jobs that, it's not like this is going to just replace the entire workforce. I mean, if you want to write your check right now, if you want to put how many zeros you want to on your employer's check, you go into one of two fields right now. One, you go into prompt engineer. Okay, yeah, apologies, Josh. I have 1 minute, but I'll wrap this up hopefully quick here. Is two fields you can write your own check in. The first is prompt engineering for AI, generative AI. If you can train the AI and these large language models and these foundations we've had that are interpreting basic things like questions being asked, and fine tune that to a company's proprietary data, whether it's energy for Shell Oil Company, or whether it's any company out there that's got important data that you've become the expert on for decades. That's the first most important thing. Direct the AI to give you the answers that are accurate. And then the second thing is work as a fabrication facility. Work as a master technician in a fab, because the pace of new chip manufacturing out there in the world is going exponential right now, right? $30-40 billion a year Taiwan Semiconductor is spending on new fabs. Intel fully committed to building new foundries. Samsung trying to keep up. New companies like Global Foundries, whoever it is, like there is an arms race to have high, cutting edge chips, high performance computing chips. And if you are really good at building the facilities that can make those, you write your own check right now.
That's awesome. Well, it was great having you on, Simon. Do you kind of want to tell where can people find you and learn more about Seven Investing and get better connected with the type of content you put out?
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for the opportunity. We are 7investing.com is our website. We make stock recommendations each and every month. We talked about a whole lot of innovative stuff here in this conversation, but we also have, stable dividend paying companies, value companies. We put 7 recommendations out each and every month. And then we want to encourage individual investors like you and I to make our own decisions, because investing is a personal thing. We don't all do this the same way. We kind of want to put a buffet of options out there that we've done a lot of research in, and that let you make your own decisions off of it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Simon. I hope we can have you on in the future and talk some more, but I'll try to be respectful of your time. And thanks again for coming on. It was a really great time.
I had a great time. It was a lot of fun. Thanks very much, Josh. Thanks, Monty.
Absolutely.
It was great talking, Simon. Thank you.